Welcome to our next episode, Stories with Pravin, and I'm today joined by one of the great cricket follower of the game, Cody. So he's my work colleague as well. So it's great pleasure to welcome him to the show. Welcome, Matt, to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine. Always good to have a lot of interesting cricket conversations. We've already had many off air, so nice to have one on air as well.
Yeah, and Matt, I want to go straight away to the topic and the essays so far. So what do you make so far of this essay series? What do you make initial thoughts on this?
Very interesting series so far. Unlike a lot of other series, I think you see in Test cricket at the minute, it's three very, close games, even games. Australia managed, obviously to get the first two wins, and England come back with a win in the third game there. Um, a lot of Test cricket you see at the minute is kind of one team gets out to a lead, bats first, makes 500, and they are basically in control for the rest of the game. And that's a bit different in this occasion, right? It's each day basically, or even each session is sort of swinging from one way to the other. No team is really getting too far, out ahead of anyone else. And it's really engaging. You go to bed basically at the end of each day and think, depending what happens tomorrow, actually
Yeah.
determines who won the day before. Australia will be happy. They are 2-1 ahead. If you offered them that before the series started, after three games, they'll be leading. I think they will absolutely accept that.
Yeah.
Um, and England with a win in the last game there, and the style of cricket they play, I also think that they truly believe that they can win the series from here. So, yeah, great series so far.
Isn't it? It's still even, isn't it? The SS is still alive. And I
Yep.
just want to go back to the Edgbaston test as well, because it was the heroics of Pat Cummins, isn't it? Because 70 more runs to get with Pat Cummins in the center. What do you make of that? Was that a great escape for Australia, or do you back Australia to win the match from there?
No, great escape from Australia. I think we had our chances earlier in the game to set up a victory. But it was more 280. I think they were chasing at the end.
Yeah.
So to get themselves a bit behind, you feared that maybe the opportunity was missed. But yeah, they found some runs that I didn't believe that they had, and pulled off a great result. Cummins and Lyon.
Yeah, it was a great show, isn't it? And then to take 1-0 lead to home of cricket at Lords, and that incident, Matt, what do you make of that? The Johnny Bristow underarm from
Yeah.
from Alex Carey. So that was the biggest talking point, isn't it, in the cricket arena, not only in Australia, all around the world, and people they are still questioning Australia as well. Was that within the spirit of the game? What's your thoughts on this?
Uh Look, that's a controversial one. I think, like, first off, I think Lord's home of cricket. Australia's record actually at Lord's is very good. I think they've only had one defeat in the last 90 or so years. So their record at Lord's is very good. So they were, yeah, I'd say of all the grounds, it's one that they're probably a bit more comfortable at than some of the other ones. But yeah, what was basically another great win for Australia. But you're right, it was overshadowed in a lot of parts by the Bairstow incident, I guess we're calling it now. A lot of controversy. My sense from I mean, I obviously live in Australia. My sense, and I was able to watch it live given the time zone. Well, there wasn't too much wrong with it. I didn't have a major issue with it. First, there's a few different ways to look at it, right? The first way I looked at it was, the laws of the cricket, very clear, obviously out, no issues with that point. The second part is the spirit of cricket, right? And the nebulous idea of whatever the spirit of cricket happens to mean, to different people, different things, no clear set of guidelines. You can really only look at precedent of similar type incidents. And I think when you go and look at those incidents, you'll find examples of Bairstow doing similar things, Stuart Broad doing different things, but maybe questionable by the spirit of the law things in previous Ashes series. Brendan McCullum, a history of it as well. Everywhere you look, basically, and every team you look at, you find a lot of similar type incidents. and therefore none of them exactly the same, but also none of them entirely different at the same time as well. So um, I didn't really understand the uproar as much there. I think if it happened earlier in the game, let's say it happens on day one, I don't think England have as much of a problem with it then as well. I think it's the fact that they thought they were getting themselves back into the game with that Stokes innings, and I think that was a bit of the emotions sort of probably bled into it. The main two, how I try to put the shoe on the other foot, if you like, is I looked at it through the lens of what would, if the scenario was reversed. Let's say Bairstow was the one wicket keeping, and he did it to David Warner, for example. Choose any batsman, David Warner. Um, how would England react, and how would the crowd react? What would the reaction to that be? I believe Stokes come out after the game and says he wouldn't like to win games that way.
Yeah.
You can take him at his word, of course, and maybe we should. I'm maybe a little bit more skeptical. I certainly think 2 days earlier, Bairstow tried to do that against, I think, Marnus or
Marnus,
David
yeah.
Warner.
Yeah, it was with
Was
Marnus.
Marnus, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, it was Marnus. So tried to do that. Of course, Stokes still has to withdraw the appeal if he wants to. I'm skeptical as to whether that would have been the case. And in that sense, I think it was more who it was and where we were playing that was more important. And the second thing is, if it did happen to David Warner,
Yeah.
what would my reaction to that be? And I think my reaction to that as an Australian fan watching the game is I would proportion the majority of the blame for what happened towards David Warner himself for being careless. I think it was a careless bit of batting.
Yeah.
I think if you watch Kerry take the ball and release the ball all in one motion,
Yeah.
the ball was quite clearly not dead. The
Yeah.
umpires did not deem the ball dead. Even if you're watching Stokes at the other end through one of the camera angles, you see Stokes has not also left his crease to come and have a discussion with Bairstow. So even he is clear that the ball is not dead. So I think the idea that Bairstow felt that he could determine when the ball was and wasn't dead, I think was careless and potentially even a bit arrogant, I think, from him. And as a result, um, yeah, I didn't have a great problem with it. I think it's acted as in the media certainly has acted as a big bit of distraction. England obviously lost that, went on to lose that game, went 2-0 down, a bit of a distraction around that. And I think one thing that's a little bit interesting is that England have kept Johnny Bairstow away from the media since that happened.
Yeah.
I think they've chosen not to put him in front of the media because as a wicketkeeper himself, someone who's evidence of trying it before, evidence of even quotes similar to as long as it's within the laws of the game, he has no problem with it. Things like that. I think they're trying to create a little bit of a smokescreen around the incident there, and it's a bit of a distraction tactic. So, look, the spirit of the game, laws of the game, no issue. Spirit of the game. I also don't have a bit of an issue there. I don't think it is. I prefer that instead. I think it was Green who bowled the ball. Would I prefer that he just bowled Bairstow out and it would have been a clean dismissal? Of course, we would remove all of this conjecture. But no, back to the question. Not a huge issue with it.
Yeah, isn't it? Because it was definitely within the laws of the game, and at the end of the day, the laws of the game that do matter, isn't it? After,
They do.
yeah, and then after that controversy, it was again Ben Stokes' fantastic inning, isn't it? But
Brilliant,
he could not
brilliant.
take he could not take his side over the line. But what do you make of that inning from Ben Stokes?
It's like a movie that you've seen before, right? It's
Yeah,
seen it before at Headingley
yeah,
4 years ago. I remember I watched that game live, and it was hard to watch the first time. And it was almost exactly the same. You could argue actually it was even better innings, right? He had a lot more work to do on this occasion. He was batting very sensibly, almost not even like Bazball. He was batting very sensibly for the first 50 or so, while he had batting partners around him. And I think once Bairstow went out, two things happened. One, he realized he had lost his last official batting partner, and they were into what was quite a long tail. And the second thing, he was probably a bit annoyed. He was probably a bit angered by what had taken place, and he
yeah,
switched gears. And he switched gears immediately.
yeah.
Started launching sixes, 155. And for times there, you started to wonder whether they would be able to pull this chase off. But I think just on this occasion,
Yeah,
They were just too far behind when he got started to be able to pull it back. Phenomenal innings, and
yeah,
even when you're watching the third test there, while he's in, you're not comfortable. I know they got over the line eventually, but yeah, while he's at the crease, no matter what position they're in, Australia will never be comfortable. He's a phenomenal performer in those big moments. He just finds another gear.
yeah, isn't it? After that, trailing back 0-2 in the series, then again England they came victorious. That was just last week at Headingley. So if we talk about that match as well, isn't it? Because Australia were not that much far behind in that game as well. They were right in the game, but the way the England tail-ender batsmen they took the match away, is that a worrying sign for Australia going forward? Because they are finding hard to get the tail-ender batsmen dismissed early in the innings.
It is a little concerning. You saw how good Mark Wood had
Yeah,
was. I think there was sort of two key points where, if I look back at that game, where I think Australia lost the game. I think the first one was Mark Wood demolishing the tail in the first innings.
yeah,
Had Australia managed to sneak an extra 50, maybe 75 runs out there, all of a sudden their first innings total looks a lot more imposing. Um, so cleaning the tail up there was the first one, and the second one was at the end of day two. I think Australia was just batting, went into bat again, and they lost Marnus and Steve Smith quite cheaply to Moeen Ali, I
Moeen
think it
Ali, yeah,
was.
yeah,
Yeah, a couple of loose dismissals, and had they got to stumps two down. Those guys resuming the next morning, 8 wickets in hand, be able to set a bit of more of an imposing total than 250.
yep,
I think that was another missed opportunity. Those two going the next morning. It's Marsh who's out quite cheaply, and then and the rest sort of follow from there. To cleaning up I thought Australia did a good job of staying in the game as
yep,
long as possible. In my opinion, they never really got truly ahead of the game, but whenever England looked like they were going to run away with it, Stark was actually the main guy
yeah,
at doing it, and he's probably one of his prime roles. Well, he's got a few roles, but one of them is definitely cleaning up the tail for Australia. He's got the extra pace that the others don't have. And he sort of kept taking wickets at just the right intervals, just to try and keep pegging England back. But ultimately, they ran out of runs. They were probably 50 runs short, and weren't able to clean up the tail. I think England, its tail was a good one, right? Wokes and Wood. Wokes in particular is a relatively good batsman. I think he's got a Test 100. And Mark Wood is good. He's good enough for a quick 25 here and there, hit a few sixes, which he did in both innings. So they were good enough batsmen to get them over the line. No issues there, right? I think in the same way that our tail got us over the line at Edgbaston, their tail returned the favour here at Headingley. So um, yeah, Australia weren't far away. They weren't far away.
yeah,
They'll still
isn't
be
it?
happy with 2-1, I think.
Yeah, and before I go to fast forward, Corey, I just want to know the rivalry of Ashes, especially what that means to Australian community here in Australia, because there was before the Ashes, there was a World Test Championship final, and I can see even in the media they are not giving that much specific interest to the WTC final, and they were talking about Ashes. So what does this mean to Australian media, isn't it? I just want to know.
Uh, Ashes first. I'll start there. Look, I'd say it's the Ashes is alive and well. It's the series that that probably matters above all else for both sides, right? It's the old enemy. It's the one you have to win. In terms of other rivalries in cricket, or at least other Australian rivalries, I know there's some big ones. But Australia, like teams like India is I would say a harder place to go on tour. India is always a tough team as well. I've never seen a weak Indian Test team in my days. So those series are always very hardly contested. Very challenging, very draining, different styles of cricket, very gripping, but they're kind of different in that regard. The Ashes is more history and tradition, and has been going on for 150 or so years, or 100 years, or whenever it started. I know that they played in the first test. But yeah, so it's been going on for a lot longer. And that's sort of the yardstick by which we measure, I guess, success of the test team, and how strong the test team is at any point in time. So our record in Australia has been very strong of late. Generally, England have found it a lot harder down in Australia. And in recent times, those series in England have started to get a little bit closer, which has been good. So the drew last time out in 2019. Obviously, we remember the 2005 Ashes.
Yeah, this is my next
Ne
question to you. Like
nearly 20 years.
people talk about 2005 Ashes, 2004 and 5 Ashes, and they say that that was the best Ashes series they ever witnessed. But if you see the current Ashes series, I think that is not that far away as well, isn't it?
No, not far away at all. Not far away at all. And depending on how these last two tests go, I think if England, heaven forbid, but if England were to win the series 3-2 from here, I think certainly in England they will be talking about it as if it is greater. If Australia was to come out and put a dominant performance in Manchester and win 3-1 and make the last one a bit of a dead rubber, then maybe some of the fizzle will come out of it. So but I guess nothing to suggest that could happen, right? It's the three games have been very tight so far, so nothing to suggest that it won't be more of the same. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? And now Australia is still there 2-1 up in the series. The series has been decided by an inch, isn't it? Because we cannot
Yep.
separate two sides that much. So going ahead to Manchester, what Australia need to do if they have to win the Ashes series in England?
The first thing I think they need to do is win the toss. They're 0 from 3 from tosses so far, so Cummins
Yeah,
has not had a good record so far. And
yeah.
look, the toss, unfortunately, fortunately, it plays a big part in Test cricket, right? It's the conditions change drastically day to day.
And especially even in England, but
Especially in
yeah,
England,
yeah,
especially in England, right? So maybe more importantly in England. So I'd say that's the first thing. If we can, particularly with depending on what type of pitch you're going to get, you're either going to a flat one or a green one, and depending on whether you bat or bowl. But winning that and being assertive with whatever you choose to do and doing it well, I think is the first thing. The second thing I think Australia will be looking for is runs from Marnus and Smith. I know Smith already has 100 in the series. But between the two of them, I don't think they will be thrilled with both their performances thus far. Australia will probably be looking for more of a well-rounded batting performance. I don't think they've necessarily had that to date. They've been pretty good with the ball,
yeah,
very good in the field, I would say. But the batting has sort of been reliant on Usman Khawaja, who's done it a couple of times, and a freak innings from someone like a Mitch Marsh, which we saw in the last inning. So not necessarily traditional runs from everywhere, and therefore I think some runs from those guys will be good. I mean, anecdotally, we lost at Australia, I should say, lost at Headingley in that game 2019. England took all the momentum into the Old Trafford test, and Smith come out. We batted first. Australia batted first. Smith made a double hundred, and Australia went on to win by 200 or so runs. And it's a very similar type of thing. We'll be looking for runs from Smith. I think Australia will be looking how Australia tends to like to play cricket.
yeah.
Whether this works on all pitches in England remains to be seen. But Australia likes to win the toss, bat first, and bat big, and basically apply scoreboard pressure. So very different to how England like to go about it. Theirs is more about backing their batsmen to chase anything, and use first day conditions with the ball. So different styles, two different styles, and that's what we're seeing as we talk about this Bazball era. Two very different styles. A little bit of a chink in the armor of that of what Australia wants to do in that scenario is they like to bowl last, and with that they like to have Nathan Lyon, and they've had the luxury of having Nathan Lyon for 100 tests in a row.
Yeah,
And I think honestly, I think he would have had a big impact on day four at Headingley
yeah,
had he played. It was clear that Cummins didn't quite trust Murphy to control the run rate, and yeah, who knows what would have happened if Lime was back in? But yeah, they're the keys to success. I think is a bit more of a well-rounded batting performance and yeah, a bit of scoreboard pressure.
Yeah, isn't it? And there is a major concern for Australia. It's going on in the form of David Warner as well. He's not been scoring that amount of runs as the team is expecting. So, what do you make of David Warner so far in this Ashes series?
Um, Underwhelming. Of course, I would think he himself would not be thrilled with how things have gone so far. I thought he was good at Lords. I think he made a pretty good 60 or so, 65 when he was sent in on a pretty good bowling pitch. So yeah, I thought he bowled well there. But he reverted a little bit to 2019, David Warner at Headingley. Couple of very sort of inevitable dismissals. It just looked quite obvious that that was how he was going to get out. He never looked comfortable. Um, what to do with him? I think Australia will stick with him, rightly or wrongly. I think I'd be very surprised if David Warner's not in the lineup for Manchester. If he was going to be replaced, there's a lot of talk at the minute about whether how you fit Marsh and Green into the team.
Yeah,
I don't think that's how you get one of those two guys or both of those guys into the team. Is with I think Australia would pick Harris first. He's the next cab off the rank in terms of opening batsman. Has been for a while. Has a couple of hundred. I think he's got a couple of hundreds in county cricket this season. Playing okay. Not. I wouldn't say he's playing. Or hasn't played. He hasn't played for a couple of months now, but hasn't played so well that he's knocking the door off the hinges and really kicking into the team. And I think Warner's probably just about got enough credit in the bank to get him through. Get him through the next game. And after that, we'll see. I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I've got another question. Like, do the sort of runs of David Warner is putting pressure back on Marnus and Stevie Smith, because Marnus, he has got nothing so far in this Ashes series. So that's the major concern as well, because he has to come back early to his innings when the ball is very hard and new, and it's getting very difficult even for Marnus, isn't it? Because David Warner is being removed early in the innings from the uh, fantastic bowling by England. So is that another concern as well for Australia going ahead to Manchester?
Uh, yeah, you're probably right. I think yeah, having Marnus come in at 1 for 10, 1 for 20, versus 1 for 80, 1 for 100 is very different. Obviously, it takes a lot of pressure off the rest of the batting lineup. If you can do that, and Khawaja's doing a great job of that.
Yeah,
I don't know what his strike rate is, but I can't imagine it's much more than 50, 55 for the
yeah,
series. And
yeah,
he's faced a ton of balls, right? So he's taken that shine off. He'd get in the England bowlers into their second and third spells, and putting and sort of pushing the pressure back in that way. So it probably is having an impact that Marnus and Smith are having to come in a bit earlier than usual. The ball's still moving; they're not as protected as maybe they would be.
yeah.
That said, I think if Marnus in particular, I mean Smith has proved it time and time again. Marnus has scored a lot of his runs in Australia. I know he had a good introductory series when he was brought into the Lord's Test in 2019 for the concussion sub.
Concussion
Couple of
stuff.
a couple of 50s in that series and played very well, of course. But I think if you look at, I don't know how many, don't quote me on how many hundreds Marnus has, but I'm sure almost all of them, bar maybe one, has been inside Australia.
Yeah,
So he's got a little bit to prove, I think, still internationally, and particularly in England. So I would like to see him also get some runs here in Manchester, and whether he's in early or late, needs to find a way.
yeah.
Needs to find a way to score runs.
Yeah, isn't it? And not only with there are more selection headache for Pat Cummins, isn't it? Just not only of David Warner, there is a selection headache. How they're gonna fit Mitchell Marsh and Cameron Green in this team? So,
Mm.
what's your thoughts on this? How he's gonna, which services he's gonna sacrifice at the end of the day?
Uh, Tough one, right? Tough one. Green is sort of the future, if you like, for Australia. He's 24 or so. Big IPL contract, good with the bat, good with the ball. I wouldn't say hasn't fully taken the test the test scene by storm yet. He had 100. I think he got 100 in India,
Yeah,
Ahmedabad, I think it
yeah.
was. Um, so he's clearly and he's fantastic in the gully with some of the catches he's pulled off. So he's clearly the future, and he will be in the team moving forward. On the other hand, Marsh came in and he looked phenomenal. He looked like he was playing on a different wicket to the other guys. Without his 115 in the first innings, Australia was probably dead and buried
And and
very, very early.
and with that strike rate of 100, isn't it? He was batting with the strike rate
Yeah,
of 100.
run a ball. Very powerful the way he's pulling the ball as well. Hits the ball very hard. And it was a handy. He picked up a couple of very useful
Important.
wickets as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, top order wickets. Right, he got the ball moving around a little bit on day 3 or day 4
yeah,
when he had a chance. So I don't think it's a difficult one. I think if the selectors had to say only one of them is going to play, I think they would play Marsh in Manchester. And they would maybe use the excuse that Green has to rest his hamstring just 1 week longer and just give him a
yeah,
little bit of breathing room there and not avoid the scrutiny of being dropped. I think that's what they would do, but my feeling is I think they'll find a way to fit both of them in. And if I think about what I'm expecting to happen, I think England produced two poor pitches, Test 1 and 2,
yeah,
lost both those games.
yeah,
Produced with needing a win, they sort of mixed it up. Brought Mark Wood in, who's now fit, and produced a fast pitch, and lo and behold, won the game. Fastest bowler in the series. Actually, he bowled one of the fastest spells ever in England as well. He was remarkable.
yeah,
I think they'll look to replicate. If I was them, I would think I would look to replicate a similar track conditions at Old Trafford if I could. Play Mark Wood again, and therefore, if Australia's not going to bowl on a pitch like that,
yeah,
Australia's not going to bowl Murphy, then I think maybe his spot can be, used elsewhere, and maybe you actually play Marsh and Green that way. I think Australia also look to bring in Josh Hazlewood. He'll probably come in for Scott Boland.
yeah,
Boland's been I can't really put my finger on why, but he's been a bit ineffective so far this series. Not had the success that he had in the Ashes series past.
yeah,
Not sure why, but I think he comes in. So I think you play Stark, Cummins, Hazlewood, and then you play both the all rounders. So you've got 5 bowling options there. You've also got Smith and Head if you want to bowl some spin
yeah.
at some point. And you stick with stick with Warner at the top of the order. I think as I sit here today, probably a week from the first ball, I think that's probably likely. If they tell me that the Manchester pitch is really going to spin,
Yeah.
then that's a tougher that's a tough question. Then that's one of probably Green or Marsh and playing Murphy, but I'm not sure. Cummins didn't seem to have a lot of trust in him in either innings, from what I saw, which is understandable. The pitch wasn't conducive to his type of bowling.
Yeah, isn't it? Just Australia, they have already missed the services of Nathan Lyon. And how
Yeah.
big is that setback going to Manchester? Because I just went through some stats as well from how the spin has played a huge role in Manchester. I just saw some
Okay.
stats as well. So that shows
Okay.
that it's gonna be it's gonna be a big blow for Australia. So how they gonna
Okay.
get back with this
Well, that's
setback?
good analysis. I didn't know that, but it sort of throws out my theory that maybe they might produce a green monster.
Yeah,
But regardless of what pitch they're playing on, Nathan Lyon is a huge loss for Australia, right? He played the last 100 or so games consecutively, nearly 500 Test wickets, takes his wickets everywhere, right?
yeah,
As an off spinner, Australia has not produced many off spinners, so to have the successes he has had, and I guess it's his bounce as much as anything, which has been held him in good stead, and that's why he's picked up as many wickets as he
yeah.
has
And even if
in
he's
Australia.
and even if he's not picking wicket, he's putting the pressure from one end, isn't it?
For sure, for
That's
sure, for sure. Yeah, he's a big loss. He really is a big loss for Australia. I think had we lost Stark, bring in Hazelwood or Boland or Neither, either who's not. I don't think he's in the squad yet, but he might be reintroduced. Like there's options to replace pretty much everyone. But I think the delta between Lyon and the next best, no disrespect to Murphy, is maybe one of the the most valuable guys we probably had in terms of how irreplaceable they are. So yeah, big loss there. And yeah, if the pitch is to swing is to spin a bit, the loss will be even greater than that. So yeah, he's a big loss.
Yeah, isn't it? Is a big